Got 3 books here that I'm all very, very interested in, and they all have vampires included. So this video is going to be where I torture myself. Yeah, okay. I could see people saying that there's kind of a predictable end to this story. I didn't feel like it was predictable. I just feel like I happened to predict it because of a situation. I don't actually know how many chapters are in this book. Oh, I just saw 43, so that... Wait, did I just find the end by accident? Yes, I have this suspicious feeling that because this is going to be mainly a romance, blood's going to play a bigger part in this one than it did in the other 2. Am I reading into things? There's a very good chance. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with books about vampires. I'm terrified. So, I was looking at my things that I wanted to read this fall and some, just because I have a list. You guys know I did a video in September talking about all the books that I want to read this fall. There's more than just that, but that was like the top tier kind of books. But I was looking at that. I was looking at fantasy books that I wanted to read on my fantasy TBR, and I found a few books that had a connection, if you will, a theme of those books, and they were books about vampires or including vampires, but also having romance to be either the main plot or one of the bigger plots in the story. So I decided to do this, which is going to be a vlog reading 3 books that all include some sort of vampire romance in some way. And I am genuinely terrified about how this is going to go. So I know I've said it for quite a while, so if you've been here for a while, I do apologize that I keep saying this, but I don't do well with vampire stories. It's because I'm squeamish when it comes to blood and gore. Now, sometimes it's okay. It kind of just depends on the story. If it's like a war book, then I know it's probably not going to be great, and so I try to steer clear from those. Sometimes if it's a medical story, I usually try to steer clear of things like that, depending on what it's about. But it's just kind of like one of those things where I'm just like, this book could go either way. And vampires is one of the stories that is almost guaranteed to make me cringe every time because blood. I mean, it's literally a book about people who are sucking blood out of somebody else, and that kind of just freaks me out. But I've got a bunch of, I've got 3 books here that I'm all very, very interested in, and they all have vampires included. So this video is going to be where I torture myself. Yeah, okay. So let me talk you through the 3 books that I have here. I think the plan is to read one and then supplement, like read one, read another book that's already on my TBR for the month, and kind of like stagger them that way so that I don't have like 3 vampire books back to back to back. So I don't get them confused. I don't think I will, just based on what these are about, but I don't want to get them confused, but also to give my brain a break. So, you will have seen 2, I think 2 of these I was able to fit on my October TBR. But the first one that I'm talking about is A Duel with the Vampire Lord. This is part of the Married to Magic series by Lise Kova. I love this series. It's a series of standalones. They're all romance happily ever after stories, but they all take place in the same world. So the first one was Duel with the Elf King. The second one is Dance with the Fae Prince. We've got Duel with the Vampire Lord, and then there's a 4th one out that I can't remember what it's called, but it's about a siren. Like that's A Deal with the Siren or something like that. So I haven't gotten that one yet, but this one came out, I think, last year, and I've just really been wanting to read it. But again, vampires, and it's just giving me, you know, those creepy vibes because vampires. So this one is, the back's kind of confusing, but it's like this girl who like basically takes her brother's place and makes a deal with his vampire lord, and it's way more to it than that. In the past, what we've done is I've been able to read these physically. I won't be able to do that just because of the amount of plans I've got for October, so I did find the audiobook of this. But this one is, again, a kind of standalone happily ever after story. So you kind of know what you're getting into with this one, but I love these stories. we've got that one. The next one is actually the one that I'm going to start with, and that is King of Battle and Blood, and this is by Scarlett St. Clair. This is the first in the Adrian and Isolde, I believe is how you pronounce it, series. I read the first book in her Hades and Persephone series, which is A Touch of Darkness, and it was fine. I enjoyed my time reading it. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I decided not to continue with that series, and this is the most recent one, I believe. This one came out a couple of years ago, and I do think there are 2 out now. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. But this one is like she marries him because she wants to kill him or something like that. Like it's one of those like she gets married for revenge and plans to kill him but then can't. However, in this one it sounds like he actually discovers this plot and they figure stuff out that way. Like she can't go through with it because he figures it out, rather than in other books like this, it's because she has feelings for him. So we'll see, but he is a vampire, I believe. It says something about, yeah, right here, Vampire King. Perfect. So, I'm terrified, but I want to give this one a shot because A, I own it, and B, I want to see if her writing's just not for me, or if it just happened to be that the Hades and Persephone was too crazy hyped, because I haven't heard really anything about this one. I think there was a lot of buzz with it when it first came out, but I haven't really heard much since, so I don't really know what I'm getting into, but there's not as much hype with this one as there was with her Hades series, so this is like a testing the waters to see if she's for me, or if like this is just an author that I should move on with. And the last one is the biggest one, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. So I've had this on my shelves for quite a while. It's the first in a trilogy. I haven't gotten any of the other ones, but I've heard this is like dark academia for Twilight vibes, because we follow a witch and a vampire. And it's about like this manuscript that she finds. It takes place in like Oxford, or at least it starts in Oxford. And she discovers this manuscript, and in finding it, it like sends out this like message or something where like everybody discovers, like knows that it's, I think of it as like a sonic wave is how I think about it. It's like something happens, it sends this echo, and everyone knows this manuscript has now been found and live. And so a bunch of people are out to get her, and including this guy who's a vampire, but I think they team up and try, like I think he's actually there to protect her. I don't really know, but it's pretty chunky. I'm a little worried about it, but I do have the audiobook, and I've heard good things about this, and we'll see. I'm giving it, I'm hoping that it's going to be okay, because, you know, yes, he's a vampire, but like the fact that he's a vampire is not, I think, the biggest, like the plot is them figuring out this manuscript. It's not, the plot is he's a vampire, you know what I mean? Like Twilight's all about vampires. This one, like there's other people included too. So those are my 3 books that I'm going to try to read in this vlog. Again, like I said, I think I'm going to stagger them and read some other things in between them just to give my brain a break, especially because like these 2 being romances, I have these being like heavy romances. I feel like this is a romance, but it's not the main point of the story. So I'm more worried about these. So I'm hoping to get these done first, just because like when you think of vampires and romance, especially this one where I think it's going to be pretty smutty, there's a lot of, let's say, blood play when it comes to smutty scenes, and that kind of freaks me out a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm more worried about these than the other 2, but I am interested in all of these in some way. So that's the plan. I'll let you know kind of when I've started this one, a little bit of my thoughts on it. I'll come in maybe doing like a halfway check-in once I get started, get a better idea of what this is actually about. But we've got assassins, and I'm worried. Actually, this whole video, I'm just worried for everything in here. But if you would like to see me torture myself by reading books that freak me out, keep watching. I hope you can see me okay, because I do not feel like getting my lights out. But I'm here to give you some updates on my thoughts of King and Battle of Blood. I am just about halfway, depending on what you're looking at. Like Goodreads, I think thinks I'm over halfway, and my audiobook thinks I'm just under halfway. But I'm in that mix somewhere. So, first opinions so far. I love this book. It is so much better than I anticipated going in, and I think I had low expectations because of my past experience with this author and books by this author. That helped, A. B, you've got a book that is about vampires, which again is not my favorite thing in the world, so I was kind of hesitant going in there, a little worried about that. And because of that, I think the relationship in here is so much fun to read about. But also, it's just like a really fun hate to love romance between Adrian and Isolde, and I just love their chemistry. I think they're just so much fun to read about. I think they've got this like banter, I hate you but I can't stay away kind of chemistry to them, and that's a lot of fun to read about. And also, well, he is a vampire, and you do get like some moments where she stumbles across him and he's feeding, or they talk a lot about it. This is kind of at wartime, so you do have a couple of like, they've stumbled across a village who has had a massacre and things like that that you would get in wartime. So they're a little gory on that level, but it's nothing too much. So I don't know if the second half is going to be a little bit more gory, because the plot of this is them traveling a lot so far. So like, Adrian and Isolde, they get married because Adrian is like the king and is basically taking over everything. And so to keep the peace, her dad is trying to kind of, I think it, and basically he gives over his land to Adrian. And not a lot of people are excited about that, but they're excited the fact that he is like, I think, keeping them alive, although they don't quite understand a lot of the behind the scenes that go into that, because a lot of them are angry at this king, so her dad, for doing that. So like, she has a guard in here that she has had somewhat of a physical relationship in the past. His name is Killian. I cannot stand him as a person. You're not supposed to like him. He's basically supposed to be the polar opposite of Adrian as a person, so that you can see the good qualities that are in Adrian as Isolde sees them. But Killian is really just like, he grates on my nerves, and I would be happy if he didn't exist. If he fell into a hole and died, wouldn't shed a tear. So that's very telling of him as a character. But I kind of got off track there. Basically, in the plot so far is that Adrian comes to talk with her dad to kind of figure out a treaty between the two of them, and he is very attracted to Isolde. And so basically he says, yeah, sure, we can create a treaty, but the thing that I want is to marry your daughter. And the king is like, absolutely not, I'd rather go to war. And Isolde is like, even though I hate you and you're kind, I can't risk my father's life, I can't risk my people's lives, I just can't do that. So yes, I will agree to marry you. And so they do that at the beginning of the book, and then they travel to his land. So where I'm at, they've just gotten there. So there is a lot of traveling. We do kind of learn about him and his people. He's got like a little bit of a band of protectors, soldiers. There's like 3 or 4 of them that are like really close to him, and they're a lot of fun to read about. There's one specifically, hold on, I'm trying to remember his name. His name is Soren, and he's just a lot of fun to read about. He's just kind of like the positive light in their little group. They're all vampires, but he's like a little positive light, and there's a lot of hints that the way that she thinks about them is different than is accurate, that maybe she is getting the wrong history, and there's just a few things that like she's been taught her entire life to think one way, and it's not quite exactly accurate. So I like their relationship. I like seeing the friendships and the side characters that we get so far in the story. Again, like I said, because we're now gone to like the vampires world, it does sound like there's not too many vampires. Adrian is very specific about the people who get turned into vampires. So I'm thinking, like, I don't know what we're going to get. Maybe because we're in this, like, his world, we are going to get way more of the feeding, and we're going to see a lot more blood and stuff like that. I don't know. We'll see. It's all on Isolde's perspective. So far, it's really great. Like, honestly, if it keeps continuing this way, this book's going to get 5 stars. And I read the first half, which is almost 200 pages. I'm on page 192. And I read this basically all yesterday. So today is the 1st of October, so I technically started this before October started. But I read this in like basically a day. So I'm plowing through this. This book is addictive. These characters are addictive. It's very action-packed, and I am loving it when I expected to feel kind of meh about it. So this gives me hope for the rest of the book. This gives me hope for the rest of the series. There is going to be 3. The second one is out. A third one, I believe, comes out next year sometime, but there's not even a title for it yet, so I don't know about that one. But I'm really enjoying it. It is so exciting to start this vlog where I was super hesitant about all the books in it with such a good beginning. So things could go downhill. There's always the possibility of that, and I'm scared that that's going to happen, but if it continues on the way it's been, it's going to be great. I have finished King of Battle and Blood by Scarlett St. Clair, and it got 5 stars. So this was a great one to start this video with. I was super nervous about this video, and this one just like quelled all of those fears. I'm obsessed with this. I want the second one. The third one doesn't even have a title yet. It just says it's going to come out sometime next year. Who knows if that's going to happen. I am obsessed. Okay, so a couple of things. All my thoughts that I came to you with when I was talking about it halfway through are all still the same. This was so good. It wasn't ridiculously bloody, which was great. I was kind of nervous being, you know, vampire-y, but it wasn't that bad. Obviously blood's gonna be a part of it, but it was like significantly more chill than I thought it was gonna be. But a couple of things I think I forgot to mention when I was talking about it is that our main character, Isolde, is amazing. She is so strong-willed. She is like, a couple of times in this book, Adrian refers to her as like warrior first, queen second. So like, sometimes people tick her off, and so she stabs them because they're jerks. Like, they all deserved it. Don't get me wrong. She doesn't just stab people willy-nilly. They all deserve to be stabbed, but like, she's definitely gonna like stab first, ask questions later. And so because of that, she stands up for her own. She's not gonna be like pigeonholed to be this perfect little princess that like her dad wants her to be, and like this guy that I think I was complaining about when I talked to you halfway through, which was a guard that she had kind of a thing with before the start of this book. And he kind of wants her to be like this damsel in distress, and that's just not who she's gonna be. She's gonna go after it. She's gonna make things work. And so I love her because of that. She's just so much fun to read about. And there's a lot of things between this book and the Kingdom of the Wicked series that are similar in my mind. There's a couple of plot things that are similar. There's a lot about the main character that especially in the later half of the series, like by book 2, in Kingdom of the Wicked, the main characters really remind me of each other, and I love that. So if you like Kingdom of the Wicked, you're probably going to enjoy this series. Again, I've only read one book, so don't quote me on if it changes in the second one, but at least by the first book, they're amazing. There was kind of a big plot twist in this book that I saw coming, and I think it's because it reminds me of a book that I've read. I'm not going to say which one because I think that'll be a huge spoiler, but there's definitely a plot thing in here that happens that I saw coming because I saw a bunch of signs, because I read a book recently-ish that is similar to that. I also don't think it's as surprising as maybe the author wanted it to be. Like, it was pretty clear, I think, where the plot reveal was going to go, just based on a few things that were happening. But I'm also terrible at picking up things, so the fact that I picked up something made me incredibly happy. So this could be kind of like, I could see this, I haven't looked at any reviews, but I could see people saying that there's kind of a predictable end to this story. I didn't feel like it was predictable. I just feel like I happened to predict it because of a situation. I still loved it. I thought it was amazing. This video was off to a fantastic start. It got 5 stars. I will hopefully get to the second one soon. I now want a copy of the second one. I think the second one has a beautiful cover. I'll put it here if you'd like to see it, but I think it's just this beautiful cover. So I'm definitely going to get it. I'm invested in the series now. I think I just wasn't in the Hades and Persephone vibe, but I also kind of knew what we were expecting from the story. It's not ridiculously smutty. Don't worry. It's got like, it does have its moments. Like, it's more smutty than not. That's not true. Hold on. It definitely has like a lot of smutty scenes, and there's a lot of sexual tension between our characters, but like the smutty scenes aren't like detailed. There's like a few details here and there, but it's not like, let's go in and give you every little thing. So just as a heads up going into this, and I still loved it. I don't know how else to tell you how much I enjoyed this story because it was amazing. I am a huge fan. So book 1 complete for this video. Very successful. I think because of that, I am going to continue with the bigger book of the options, and that is going to be A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, just because it's so big. I do have the audiobook, so I'm not too worried about that, but I think the next book for this video I'm going to pick up is going to be this one, just because it's so big and I want to give it the time. This is the biggest book. I'm looking at my TBR basket over there. This is the biggest book that I have on my TBR for the month. It is 570 something pages, for 580. So it's pretty big, but it's also a really tall hardback, and like the font is kind of small. So I'm worried about the vibe of this just because I don't know how like high fantasy it's going to be. Like I don't think it will be because it is set at Oxford, so I think it's going to be like an urban fantasy that's more like, how do I describe it? Like Twilight. I've heard of Twilight for adults. It's got City of Bones vibes, where it's a contemporary setting. It takes place in our world, but there's all these like different mythical, magical creatures because our main character is a witch. We've got obviously a vampire in here, and I think there's a bunch of different creatures who come out of the woodwork for this one. So I'm going to start this book. I'll probably come back to you before I get to halfway point, just because A, it's so big, but also because I have a very like understanding of what this book's about. So I want to kind of get into it a little bit, and then we'll figure out, I'll be able to describe what this book's about. But it's giving semi-dark academia vibes, but I think it's just because it takes place, or at least starts, at a college. I've heard some things about this. I know Becca from Becca in the Books has read this recently and really enjoyed it. So it's the first in a trilogy. I don't have the rest of these because I wanted to see how I felt about this first before I dive into the rest of the series. But I'm excited. I actually have a randomly signed copy. Like it's not like digitally signed, like it is physically signed, because you know, like you could tell sometimes, and I literally just stumbled across this from like a used bookstore. So yeah, this will be my next one. I'll let you know once I start it how it's going, a little bit more about the plot. I'm excited and nervous, but I've heard amazing things about it, so we'll see what happens. So I have made it not quite halfway, but almost halfway. I think Goodreads says I'm in like the 40-something% of this book. So it feels pretty halfway if you look at like the bookmark, but I am about 265-ish pages. I'm in the beginning of chapter 21. I don't actually know how many chapters are in this book. Oh, I just saw 43, so that... Wait, did I just find the end by accident? Yes, so 43 chapters. So from what I can tell so far, this is, as far as like what this book's about, we follow this world. It's fascinating, honestly. So in this world, there are 4 creatures. Maybe creatures isn't the right word. Species. Let's call them species. So you've got vampires, witches, demons, and humans. And demons aren't just like what you would envision, like red with horns and stuff like that. They're very human like showing, but it's to like their ability. They're very, very smart when it comes to like numbers and things like that. So I think that's kind of what determines a demon. But in this book, we follow our main character, Diana, who's a witch, and she comes from a long line. She's the very last in this long line of witches that goes back to like Salem witch trials era, and this is a very, very powerful lineage, and she remembers how the powers her mother had affected her mother. Now her parents died when she was 7, so it's been a while, but she has this very distinct memory of how her mother's powers impacted her mother. So she's kind of sworn off magic. I mean, she uses it when it's necessary. She's just kind of happy to live a mundane life. She is a doctoral student at Oxford. She's from California, so she's an American in London, and she is studying, she's like a scientist, but she's like a historian more than a scientist. She's studying like our chemical history and things like that. So she's got like a thesis on that, and she's really been diving deep into that. So she spends a lot of her time in this library, and so she reads manuscripts and gets manuscripts out and is just kind of like studying everything she can for her paper. And so she stumbles across this manuscript that she immediately opens and discovers is filled with magic. It was spelled to be closed, and so she's like, I don't want anything to do with this, and so she sends it back. And in sending it back, the spell that kept it guarded reactivated, and in doing so, it kind of set off what I envision like as a sonic blast to everybody, and they know that she's the one who has found this manuscript, but is also the only one who can open it. And so all of these demons and werewolves and other witches come out of the woodwork to try to figure out basically just wait around for Diana to open it again. And one of these vampires is Matthew. He's like the first person who approaches her, like right after, or close after she discovers this manuscript, and then all of a sudden people just start showing up. And so he has a very distinct thing. He is a scientist, and specifically he studies DNA when it comes to all these different species. So he is studying witch, vampire, demon, human, all of them. I think specifically he studies like how the DNA like can tell us whether or not these species are going to go extinct, kind of thing. And he thinks there's a book that he's been searching for forever is going to help. Well, in his process of trying to figure out how to get this book, he becomes very close with Diana, and he and Diana create this friendship relationship of sorts. And so he is literally there to protect her. And he does. He's a little bit self-motivated, at least at the beginning of like, he wants this book and there's a specific reason that he wants this book, but he's also very interested in making sure that Diana is safe. And so it stems from that. There's way more to it than this. Obviously, I'm only halfway through, and as far as like, there's been a few reveals as far as like Diana's past and her hatred towards using magic. One of the things that I'm discovering from this book is that it's very scientific, like because of his field of study. I mean, hers as well. They know a lot about history because he's lived it and she has studied it. And so he is like centuries and centuries and centuries old. And so it's very entertaining when she figures out kind of how old he is. I mean, she can't really pinpoint exactly how old he is, but she can pinpoint based on like certain things. Like, for example, she made some joke about Darwin and he was very serious about it, and she figured out that's because he's met Darwin, you know, the one who wrote The Origin of Species. So there's a lot of like, he's been around for quite a while. And there's some reveals with her past as well. And so it's just very, keeps me on the edge of my seat, but it's a book that I'm having to focus on. So I have the audiobook, but yesterday I was doing a lot of like cleaning and getting ready. I had some friends come over, and so I was cleaning the house. And so I just had my audiobook in my ear because I could kind of do those mundane tasks while I was focusing. But last night I had to physically like sit here and read because there were some conversations that they were having, and I don't pick up on everything. This is a very scholarly influenced book because of, you know, both of their fields of study, because it takes place at a college. It is very like, they're very smart, and so we learn a lot. I mean, she and Matthew don't have the exact same fields of study. They're very different, but they're both smart enough to kind of process what's going on. So I can follow the main things. So like when there's a big reveal, like there's a lot of stuff about DNA in this book. And so there's some bigger reveals about her DNA. And so I can follow that, and like the big stuff I completely understand what he is doing when he kind of goes down the rabbit hole of searching, and his main point as far as all of his experiments, maybe experiments isn't the right word, but data collection and that kind of thing. I understand the big picture, but when they get down into the nitty-gritty details, like if they're describing a thing and they're giving you details and then eventually they'll reveal the big thing, I don't get it until they reveal the big thing. So like, this book is way too smart for me. Also, it is the two of them having all these conversations about bits of history and a lot of very influential historical events, and I don't get a lot of the references, I'm not gonna lie. Like some of them clearly, like Darwin's a big one, I understand that. But there's definitely some like smaller references that I'm like, I'm sorry, what are we talking about? So there's definitely some things that go over my head, but overall I'm really enjoying this book. It's, like I said, kind of smart for me, but I think that just comes with the territory of them both being, well, she's a doctoral student, but them both being in the academic setting. They both are focused on kind of like being smart and learning. But their relationship is fascinating to me because it's not a slow burn, but it's also not too fast. It progresses pretty quickly. It's not insta love or anything like that, but it does progress pretty quickly so that they can take their relationship and have this conversation and accept that there is something going on between them and then get back to the plot. So the romance is not the biggest part, but it's not causing any issues yet, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm sure it will later on. But because of the time period that he was born in and grew up in, he's very old-fashioned. So he doesn't think of her as like a damsel in distress. And they've had this kind of conversation of like, she's like, I can fend for myself. But he wants to be a gentleman, he wants to open her door, he wants to do certain things. And so there's like this little bit of compromise between the two of them, where she's gonna have to accept the fact that he's just gonna open doors for her, and that's not going to hurt her strength. But he can also appreciate that she's a modern woman, and there's definitely some things that like she's gonna do because no one can tell her she can't. And so it's not like he's trying to be possessive in like any kind of gross way. I don't get those vibes from him at all. I just get a sense of he is old-fashioned and he's always done things a certain way, and so he's having to relearn maybe how to interact a little bit with her, and that she's going to be a little bit hot-headed on certain things, and that he's just gonna have to deal with that. And she's not going to, like, if he says, hey, stay, I'm gonna go figure this thing out, she's not just gonna stay, she's gonna go try to figure the thing out too. So there's a lot with the two of them, and I just love it. I don't know where the story could go. This is the first in a trilogy, although I did look on Goodreads, and it looks like there's a fourth book that came out a couple of years ago. Actually, came out in like 2018, so it wasn't a couple of years ago, it was a few years ago. But it follows one of the side characters in here, that it's like part of the series, because it technically says it's the fourth in the series, but it, I think, follows his story rather than our main two couples. But this one's a trilogy, and I genuinely do not know where we could go. Like, I know the point of what's like happening here, but I'm just like, it's keeping me on the edge of my seat, which is really good because I was kind of nervous. I didn't really know what to expect. It's been super hyped by both it having been out for so long, the TV show that came out. I have family members that are like obsessed with this book, so I am very excited about it, but I don't know where we're gonna go, and that's exciting. So that's kind of my halfway point, just a few thoughts. I don't really know what my overall thoughts are gonna be. Like, I don't really have a good enough idea to guess. I'm usually pretty good at guessing how I'm gonna think by the end of the book, and I don't know how I'm gonna think with this one. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but so far so good. I'm halfway through. I've got about 6 hours of the audiobook at my speed left, so hopefully in the next couple of days I'll be able to finish it. But this was the one I was the most worried about because it's the thickest, and I am actually making some pretty good progress. Okay, so I have officially finished A Discovery of Witches, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And it ended on such a cliffhanger of sorts. I mean, there was an end. I kind of figured out where it was going to end just based on what was happening in the story and where we were going to go and how fast we were approaching the end of this book. But it has a cliffhanger in the sense of like, you don't know what's next, but because I know it's a trilogy, I know the thing that like is up in the air will be fine. So I'm interested to see the second book. I definitely want to continue with this series. I'm not sure I want to own them, just because I'm not sure, like, this is such a thick book, and the writing in this is pretty small. Like, I've had to use my glasses when I'm reading this, and I've had to have the audiobook and the book in front of me for a lot of this because, like I mentioned when I came to you for my halfway point check-in, there's a lot of science stuff in this. Specifically, I mean, there's a lot of science and history in this book, and when we get into like Matthew and his area of expertise, it's really like harder to understand, at least for me personally. Like, it's more sciencey than like Diana's. Like, hers is still science, but she is the history of specific different people in science, and he is more of the practical discovering. So biology, I guess, is more his, I don't know how to explain it, but like, he's more of the experimentation, goes into like heavy terminology, things like that. Why did I bring that up? I don't remember. Oh, but I needed to have this in front of me. So I don't think I'm going to need, unless I can find them at my used bookstore. I did really enjoy my time. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars. So like, it is so fascinating. The story is interesting. I liked that by the end, we kind of had this core group of people, I think, because while you're going through this, you have Diana and Matthew, obviously, and then you have Diana has 2 aunts that are part of her life, and so they're a big part of this. Matthew's mom and, I was gonna say sister, but I don't actually think she's a sister. I think she's just like a companion for his mom. Best friend, I guess. You've got the 2 of them, and then he has a best friend, and then he's got some family, some people that he works with in the lab, someone he considers a son. So you really have like this core group of vampire, almost like werewolves. So you have this core group of vampires and witches, and in this world, like I mentioned when I came to you, kind of to give you an idea of this world, there are demons, and so there are some demons, because Matthew's best friend is a demon, and so you do have demons that play a big part of the story as well. There's just a lot to this story, and it just keeps going, and it's just really fascinating. So I loved the kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a found family, because they both have families that they care a lot about, but it is have that like found group, like this is our core group that we're going on an adventure and doing the things with this core group. So it's very fascinating when it comes to that, and I really enjoy I just really enjoyed it, and the plot and where it was going, just some things that we figure out, because Diana doesn't use her magic. That's kind of like the whole thing with her, is that like because of some traumatic experiences in her past, she doesn't use magic, and so she is figuring things out and figuring out what she can actually do, and so we're figuring it out with her, and so we're learning a lot about the witches because she's learning a lot about the witches, and so I just think that like learning about her powers is really fascinating too. So there's just so many layers to this story, and I'm interested to see where it's gonna go. One thing that I really processed kind of once I had started this one, or maybe once we got halfway through, is there was something about the writing that really stuck out to me, and I couldn't pinpoint it, and I think I figured it out, and I think her writing reminds me of Nora Roberts' writing. So it is from Diana's point of view. There are a couple of chapters that go into third person, so if something's happening to Matthew or something is happening to this person over here, it's in third person so that we can still get the important details, but it's clearly like a different point of view that we're looking at. And so that was an interesting tactic that she used. I know Nora Roberts has used that tactic before, but as far as her writing goes, there's still something about it that's just very like otherworldly, like Nora Roberts is. Specifically what I'm thinking about is the trilogy that I already read, the Guardians trilogy, is that what it's called? I think so, where it was very scientific and steeped in history, but there's fantastical elements of it. And that was very, very reminiscent to this one. And I think because of that detachedness of it, there was less urgency. So like we did see some moments where like Matthew hunts and we see him kill an animal. And so you do have those moments and you see him, you know, it's very not detailed. Like the one thing I can think of is the beginning of this, near the beginning of this book, in the first half of this book, because they're talking about DNA and where people come from, Diana offers up like DNA, like her hair and her blood, and I think a mouth swab, so they can do some like experiments on her DNA to kind of figure out some stuff. And that should freak me out. Like the idea of her getting stuck with the needle should freak me out, but it didn't, because it was literally like 2 lines and then they moved on. Like it was so not detailed. And I think that worked in its favor for me personally, because I am not a fan of all of the gross detail. So great, loved it. We'll definitely be investing in the rest of the series, at least on audio, because that's, I think, the best way for me personally and how to read it. I really have enjoyed it. It was so, so good. So yeah, 4.5 stars. It definitely kept me on the edge of my seat. The fact that this book is so big and I was able to listen to it in a relatively shorter period of time once I got into the story, very impressive. Now, I did listen to it on 2x speed. I will say that, because it is a 24-hour audiobook. So I listened to it very quickly, but also the narrators were super slow. So I said narrators, there's only one. The narrator was really slow, but I loved it. And now I've read it, and now I want to go watch the TV show. So there's that. So I've done it. Yay. Which means we are now moving on to the final book of this vlog, which is the one that honestly I'm kind of the most worried about when it comes to blood. Now that I've read the other two, this one feels very, like it could be very descriptive. I'm not entirely sure. But of course, that is A Duel with a Vampire Lord by Elise Kova. I have already read 1 chapter. From what I can take from the first chapter, which isn't a whole lot, but it did give me a little bit of an understanding of the world. So in this world, at least where she is in this community that basically hides and protects themselves from vampires. There is a like main guy, but it's called the Hunters something. The Hunters Hamlet is where they are, but it's this group of guys who are the protectors of and like the fighters against the vampires. And so her mother is a forge maiden, and so therefore she is a forge maiden, and that basically is just like the blacksmith in this town that makes all of the weaponry and stuff that the Hunter's Hamlet uses. So in this, her brother is part of this group now. It's his first big night, and it's called the Blood Moon, and I think there's something extra about the Blood Moon that makes the vampires more dangerous, because it actually is like they'll come out of the woodworks. I don't really know as far as that, but I know that she is working with all of the weaponry and stuff, and so was her mother, and therefore it's kind of like all of the women do that, and then the men join this hunt. And then, of course, based on the back, something's going to happen with her brother, and she's going to switch places with him and go with the vampire lord. So I'll let you know when I get halfway through this book to kind of have a better idea of this. The cool thing is I am listening to this on audio, and the narrator is the same one who does all the Crescent City books. So I already feel like a kinship with this narrator because I understand how she narrates things, and I just really like her voice. So I'm loving it. I'm very excited to see where we go. I don't have really... Obviously, I literally just started it, but I will come back to you when I have a better understanding of what this world is and the plot of it. But I'm expecting good things, but I'm also nervous just because I know this world and I know this author, and I have this suspicious feeling that because this is going to be mainly a romance, blood's going to play a bigger part in this one than it did in the other two. Am I reading into things? There's a very good chance, but we'll see. I'll let you know when I reach halfway what I think. Hello, it's been a hot second since I've talked to you, but I've actually finished A Duel with the Vampire Lord. So I thought I'd just kind of come and tell you my final thoughts on this one. This one was what I was worried this entire video was going to be. I have conflicting feelings about this. I ended up giving it 4 stars because by the end I was very interested in what was going on. I was kind of obsessed with the story. I was on the edge of my seat. It had a very sweet ending. I had like a lot of feels, so it felt like I couldn't quite give it a 3.5 because that's what I was like leaning towards. But by the time I got to the end, I felt like 4 was good, but it's like a very, very low 4. So with that being said, I did not get as invested in this world as I have with some of the other books in this series. The first 2 books in this series I loved wholeheartedly. I was obsessed with them. I feel like I gave one of them, at least one of them, a 5, and maybe the other one a 4.5. I can't exactly remember, but I was like really, really invested in them. And this world, for some reason, did not interest me, I guess is the right word, as much as the other ones. So like it was interesting, it was an interesting world. It's just like, I think there were too many moving parts and it got a little confusing because it wasn't until like the very last little bit of the book that I finally grasped what this world was. So I don't think I gave you a good like definition? I don't think I gave you a good summary of what this book was about, but we follow our main character, who I've been saying her name wrong every single time because it's spelled like Lorraine, but it's not. It's Florian, and that like really threw me off. So Florian lives in this place called Hunter's Hamlet, which I kind of explained to you a little bit when I came to you to announce that I was doing this because I read like a chapter at that point. And so she lives in this place called Hunter's Hamlet. It is a place that is protected from the vampires, and there's this guard that is supposed to protect them. Now, she's a forge maiden, which basically means that like she works as like a blacksmith and kind of like in the smithy. So she makes all the weapons, she makes all the metal bits and pieces for their outfits, and like she doesn't really have control over her life. She's going to be told who she's going to marry. She's I think 18 or 19 at this point, and she's basically going to carry on the line. Like she doesn't really have any choice. It is set at a time where it's like, I think men have more of a say than women do, but still in this world, you get married because you fall in love. But she has known because of her position that she's never going to have that option. So she's kind of like never thought about being with someone before in that instance. And so her brother's part of this Hunter's Hamlet. No, that's what the place is called. I can't remember what like the guard is called, but there's a guy called the Master Hunter, and he's the one that's in charge. And he kind of makes all the decisions and stuff. And so her brother is part of this guard. And on the full moon, it's like there's a full moon and the vampires come to like get blood basically. And this time around, it's the red moon, which only comes every century. And so the Lord of the Vampires comes out. And so Jude has been tasked, her brother has been tasked with killing him. And so she ends up getting sucked into the mess, and because of a situation, the vampire lord makes a last minute decision and kind of takes her with him when he leaves. And we find out that the vampires, or vampires as they actually prefer to be called, are under a curse, and everything that she has been taught as she grew up is wrong. And so she is kind of relearning the world, and the two of them create this pact where she's going to help him figure out a way to kill, like get rid of this curse, and neither of them can harm each other while they're doing it. So it's like this blood oath that they basically can do things together, because in this world, it's called Midscape, I think is how you pronounce it, but like that's the world that this entire series takes place in, and humans cannot last in this world longer than a few days. So this blood oath is his way of kind of giving her some of his power, and therefore she will be able to live in wherever they are. And so it's a lot about the curse. And the world is very confusing because you learn all these little bits and pieces, and like it all revolves around blood magic, because like even humans have magical powers, but your blood tells the history of who you are. And if you take someone else's blood, then like there are ways for you to kind of go into their memories. And so that's like a trait that the vampire can do, but a lot of, I think anyone can do. I don't really know. That's why I got confused, because like it sounds like anyone can do it, but then I think maybe it's only the vampire who can do it. But there's like a whole thing, and there's a whole hatred, vampire or vampire versus human, and like it's just, there's a lot to this world, and it gets very confusing very quickly. So I think that's why I didn't enjoy the world as much, but I loved their romance, because it is a hate to love, which you guys know is one of my favorites, and it's also like the banter is perfect, the chemistry between them is amazing, the tension between them is fantastic. And these are new adult books, so like there are smutty scenes, but they are way not described. So I say new adult in the sense of they probably have the same description as like a YA book, but the characters in this book are older, so they do fall within that new adult rather than like a teenager, like a 16-year-old going through this thing. I really love this author. I think she has a really interesting way of creating a world, and then she does, the one thing that does kind of drive me nuts about her works is that she wraps up the plot and like comes to the conclusion in like the last 2 chapters. So this book is 420 pages long, give or take. Yeah, 420, 421. She figured out what she needed to do on page 410. So she had 10 pages to wrap up the book, and it wraps up very quickly. And all of her books are like that, at least in this series. I haven't read anything else. So like that kind of drives me nuts, because I know that even though we're getting close to the end, it's like not going to be solved until the very end. I am interested to see what the next book is, because it does follow a siren, and then I did look on Goodreads and there's actually a 5th book that's out, and I feel like that one, I feel like wolf was in the title, so we're gonna follow like werewolves or something. So like I am interested in the series, I just don't know if I need to keep collecting them, I think is where I'm at. But I loved this. It did have a lot more blood involved in it than the other 2, I think because of the romantic elements, and blood played a huge part in the romantic elements, which is what I was afraid of with the other 2, but mostly King of Battle and Blood. And it actually didn't play, I mean it did play, but it didn't play as much of a role as I thought it was going to. So I still enjoyed it. It still got 4 stars, but this is what I expected all of them to be like, and the fact that all 3 of these in this video were not was good. So that's kind of my final thoughts on that, and that's it. I've read the 3 books that I meant to read for this vlog. I was supposed to come out significantly sooner than you guys are seeing it. It's just kind of one of those vlogs that kept getting pushed back because this book took so long to get through, because I just could not find myself wanting to pick it up, unlike the other 2, which I was heavily invested in. So I think this was successful. I didn't really know what to expect going into it. I thought it was going to be scary. I thought we were going to have books that I was going to take a lot of pauses during, but I was able to actually read a lot of these like back to back. So I think we did pretty good. I guess the conclusion that I'm coming to is that I don't love vampire books still. I still think that there are parts of vampire books and I'm like, yeah, but the 3 that I chose worked out in my favor. So if something does sound interesting in the vampire vein, I didn't mean to do that. If something does sound interesting that includes a vampire, then it might be worth the try, I guess. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy this hodgepodge of a video? Let me know if you have any recommendations of books that include vampires that you guys just love. I still am very squeamish when it comes to blood and stuff, but I got over it a little bit in this video just because I knew what I was getting into. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there as well as other fun bookish links, so don't forget to check all that out. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!